Order the meeting for the Public Works Committee for Tuesday, July 25th, here at 5 o'clock. And I'd like to begin with a open forum for anybody who wants to bring up anything that's not on the agenda. And seeing that there's no one out there right now, we'll go to the next item. We'll go and review the 2018 road bond and the completed projects. Tom, I think that's you.
Yep. So you'll notice that they handed out first this form says 2023 review of the 2017 road plan. And basically I've got some talking points about what we did with the last road bond, how it was arrived at. And then in that document, I've also got some steps to work on for the next road bond. And so what I'm looking for there is if you review those, if there's anything I've missed, or if you have any ideas for what might need to be done for the list of roads that we're going to look at. Just let me know so I can kind of include it in the work that we're going to do over the next several months to prepare the road bond for 2025.
Tom, can you real quickly review for us what sources of income are available for road improvements in Nisswa, in the state of Minnesota? What do we have to work with as a city?
So right now, the city does not use assessments. So really what we work with is funds from the general levy.
And that's the sole source?
It is not the sole source. We are getting, I forget the amount. This is something I'll have to bring forward, but Jenny informed me we will be getting, it used to be called local government aid. I think they give it a different acronym now, but it's basically that. I want to say it was like $80,000 that we'll be getting going forward.
For how long a period of time?
I don't know.
So if we were over 5,000 people, we would be eligible for more state money, right? Is that right?
I don't know that either, probably.
That's my understanding. That's so I'm just wondering why towns the size of Nisswa are penalized basically, for road construction compared to bigger cities.
I'm not sure.
Where are we at for population now?
1,900, I believe.
Oh, we're a ways from $5,000.
1975.
No, that's from, over 10 years ago. I don't know, probably
No, the
2,500 maybe.
no, the recent one is 1,975 or so. Yeah, it went down a little bit from before, just a couple people.
I want to say it's 1967. Yeah,
Well, so anyway, we aren't anywhere close to 5,000.
no,
Right.
not realized.
But it makes it tough because we've never assessed anybody that I know of for street improvements. So everything's got to come out of bonding, which means it's a tax levy. And then, people wonder why our taxes are what they are, or why don't we fix more roads all the time?
Right.
And we're saddled with that same situation all the time.
So inside of here, I did bring that up. We will look at the city's road assessment policy and see if there's anything we would like to add to that, or if we want to make changes to it. So if you have information that you want to go over, say next month, if there's something that you can send me, if there's something that interests you or that you think would be of interest to this committee, go ahead and send it to me and we'll include it in next month's.
I guess I was more curious politically why pressure hasn't been put on by
Well-
these smaller communities, to do something about that, because that's really unfair.
Well, who represents the small town like this in St. Paul?
Yeah.
Well, Tom, I think this is not something that is, it's a big secret. I think it's been talked about over the years, right? The way that the village or the city of Nisswa pays for road improvements and building new roads. It's just always been city at large. And I guess I'd be interested in knowing what other cities, comparable to Nisswa, if there are assessment policies out there and how they work, and I think it's time to start looking at that. I mean, you have a good program here that you've gotten put in place. I think it's time to start looking at, something other than the city at large, look at assessments.
Especially when you look at this,
Yeah,
there's a lot of need here. And obviously we can't do all that now, even within the next 10 years.
I mean,
So,
you look at larger cities, they have the benefit of, state aid, sources of funding. I don't think that's present here on any of your roadways within the
hasn't
city.
been. No, I said it hasn't been.
No. So it falls to the taxpayer or, to the resident taxpayer. I don't know. I guess I'd be interested to know, and I really couldn't guess, a city the size of Nisswa, 2,000 thereabouts. Are there other cities out there similar in size that do have an assessment policy in place and how that's been working?
I'll be digging up some examples of that as we move into it a little further, probably maybe as early as next month. I didn't do it for tonight, but,
I mean, recognizing that can cause a lot of commotion for a city council.
well, so when we did do this 2017 road plan, assessments were a big discussion then.
Yeah.
And some of the committee, council members at the time, were especially the mayor, were very adamant to not have
Right.
an assessment.
Right.
So where we left it at that time was that anything that was a basic road would be a part of this 40-year road cycle that I discussed in here. And it would all be covered underneath the levy. And the only time we'd be assessing a road is if you asked for something over and above a basic road. So if you had to have street lighting that wasn't standard, if you were asking for wide
Curb.
sidewalks or bike paths,
Mhm.
increased tonnages sometimes, or paving it more often than every 40 years.
Mhm.
Now, that 40-year cycle too is something we have to talk about because that was just the first throw at it. We didn't have any kind of a cycle to the roads as far as how often that they should be resurfaced. And so I recognized even at that time that this was probably too long of a cycle, but it at least got the council to accept the concept that the road has a life cycle too.
Right. Right.
Joe, this is a question for you. Granted, I understand it's different from road to road based on the usage and the tonnage, but an asphalt road on a typical residential street, what type of life cycle does that have before it needs to be resurfaced?
He's right, when you see 7.
7?
You do a patch and overlay and a patch and overlay, then you reconstruct the road.
Okay.
So 30 year. 7, 28, 21, 28, something like that. And it's not the 40 year, but I've been hearing a lot of 30s.
Okay.
It up here on this material that you have, probably go 50. It's really good. And the only your real big problem is break down the bituminous, the asphalt inside it. That breaks down after a while, dries out, oil goes up. But your road subgrade is really good.
How long does that surface typically last?
Well, you do that, you do it, you guys, I'm not chip seal, so you don't do them, but sometimes at least every 7 years, it's on a cycle where you can do a patch and at least patch and crack, areas. If you're not doing chip seal, that's fine. Probably an overlay at 21 years.
Okay.
That cycle, that third cycle.
So we've never done overlays while I've been here.
Yeah, mill and overlay, you haven't.
Yeah, we've done a
Yeah.
mill and overlay, but the roads we've done have been out at that 40-year.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, if you got new roads, start those cycle, on that cycle. But your older roads that you had that were in here that are all beat up, you really couldn't put them on any kind of cycle. I think it's catch up then, is it? I'm pretty sure.
So we've been doing crack filling about every 3 years, depends.
Yep.
And then patches as needed. A lot of the patching that we're doing is driven by, we don't have drainage. And so you'll see we have places where the water can just sit up against the edge of the pavement. Right, where where we don't have that, given the base that we have, the roads hold up fantastically well. If you want to see roads that are well built in Nisswa, you can go to Fish Trap, the development in Fish Trap Lake. That's really well. It's all nice wide ditching. Never any problems with water. Same with up, if you're familiar with where Councilman Gary Johnson, who used to be a councilman here, lives up on his Padre Court, up in the northwest corner of the city, just before you get into Lake Shore. That's another development where it has a nice wide ditching. Drainage isn't an issue, but the pavement's lasting a very long time. That was put in before I started here, and it still looks really good. So it's at least 50 years old.
Your subsoils here, it's not clay and water and stuff. Sand is like, the best. The best.
The worst we have is where trees are up against the road. You got tree roots pushing up on the pavement, so the things like Camp Lincoln Road, the roads through Grandview. There's no place for the water to go. There's no place to push the snow off the edge of the road. So you end up between that and road salt. That's
All those old towns that have the sidewalks, that the tree, when you talk about the trees, they all pushed up all of the sidewalks. Don't do that as much anymore, doesn't it?
One more factor that not too many people are aware of is that MinDOT cut back on the amount of asphalt in all their standard mixes some years ago. And it's not a lot, but it's less. And you can talk to any county engineer, anybody like that, they'll tell you the same thing. So they don't stand up quite like they used to. Plus, we have more traffic in general than we used to.
right. So one thing I've talked about with some of the staff here is maybe leaving some of our lower traffic roads where they're a cul-de-sac or dead end, say like Edna Lake Road or Mitchell Court or some of these. There's not a lot of traffic on some of them. Maybe they can stay on the 40-year cycle, but maybe the ones where we have a lot more commercial traffic, such as Hazelwood or Smiley Road in front of Schaefer's, all of those, maybe those would drop down into a 25 or 30-year cycle. So that's something I might explore with Joe and bring back some kind of a cycle for maintenance on the road.
Well, the fact that you have a plan, that's the main thing, and then you can just massage that, on a, whatever your review basis is.
Yeah, key word there when you said massage is that not all towns are the same and not all programs work the same, and depending on, again, back to your subsoils and stuff like that. What Apple Valley is a 40, would be a good 40. That's just like this town, all sand. And then there's Maple Grove, where you're lucky you can keep a road on there for 5 years without heaving, because all the trees, clay and everything else in that town. So it has a lot to do with what your condition is of your, it's not just it works in the town next to you, so it's gonna work in your town. So.
Well, I do want to recognize the work that you have done, because driving around Nisswa is considerably more pleasant than driving in Baxter. I've been
That's-
driving in Baxter a lot lately and I hate it. The roads are just about anything that goes east to west is just garbage.
Huh.
So that's all I'll say about that.
Well, the one question I have is, to get back to what Bill was, mentioning. What was the reason that you're aware of that we do not do? That we don't go ahead and just assess? What was the reasoning back then that you understand?
They just were not in favor of a road assessment policy.
Is there a reason for wanting not to do so?
I think they felt at the time that we were collecting enough money in taxes, property taxes, that a road assessment shouldn't be necessary. I think that was kind of their logic on that. Some of them just felt that it was unfair for whatever reason to have a road assessment.
Once you start that, then it starts.
I mean, it's usually the first people that are gonna get caught up in that, right? That are gonna be the ones that complain. I know in New Ulm, and I was, city administrator there. I happened to live on a street that was the first street of this new, assessment program. I think the city council president did that on purpose, but. But eventually, once you get it in place, you take the politics out of it. It's no longer a political decision, it's part of an ongoing program. And it just kind of becomes part of the culture of the of the city. St. Cloud is.
And are you assessed based on the amount of road frontage property that you
Yeah,
have?
I mean, I lived in town, so, like 75 feet and, there's a formula. And then the city kicked in so much, and then the homeowner, the property owner was responsible for so much, and you just knew up front. It's gonna cost you $1,200 this year for, your part of the assessment, shows up on your tax bill and.
Mhm.
It's a heck of a thing to get it started, but then once it becomes part of the program, well, that's just the way it is, year to year.
I mean, I realize that with Nisswa, we're a little bit different than other cities. From my understanding, because we have only just under 2,000 people, yet in the summertime, we're overrun. I mean, we have to have an infrastructure ready to handle maybe about 10,000 people coming here. And that's a lot of infrastructure that you have to have. So I'm wondering, it might be difficult to come up with a reason or a good example that would mirror what we are doing here to try to find out about the assessments.
So kind of piggybacking on what you just said, that also was an argument point in 2017, why they didn't want an assessment. They felt we should be able to get the sales tax similar to what the county does because of all the tourist traffic. There was a hope that we were gonna somehow get that. And they wanted to use that to pay for road improvements. That hasn't materialized. And here it's, 2025 is right around the corner, so where's the money gonna come from? One thing I can say to you, if you look at, back in 2017, I tried to forecast a little bit of what I thought we would spend. And so there's this 10-year road bond plan, road list I gave you. And so in that time, I kind of gave you a rough estimate of what I thought some of these roads that we're going to be looking at in 2025 would cost to repair. Obviously, this has gone up. And this is one of the things I'm gonna ask for Joe's help on, is to give you estimates on these roads as far as what the cost will be to improve them. Cause at that time I was saying it would be in 2017 dollars, it would have been 1.6 million to redo the roads, this go around. I'm thinking that's not even gonna come close, but I don't know, it's gonna be. So road assessments may be very necessary to make that happen.
So at that time, they were thinking we'll have a sales tax,
I think they did, yeah.
which never happened. Yeah.
We go after something like a tax on short-term rentals.
Which is that local option sales tax. I mean, that's quite a bit of work to get something like that pushed through the legislature.
And
they
also the
take them
state
on
has
an
a
individual.
moratorium on it right now too. We can't do it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I think they were just being the legislature was just being inundated with these. And
Yeah. Especially now that they got
Possible if
money.
the, this state aid that we're going to be getting, like, I called it LGA, but I don't know what, I forget what the acronym was gonna be now. But if that was guaranteed or looked like it would exist for a while in the future, you could use that to fund a road bond possibly, 'cause depending on what the payment is on it. Thank you. Right, well, that all only probably as good as whoever the next governor will be or something too, so. But if that were to continue, you could possibly offset with that, in addition to any assessment you could come up with, so.
This might be a little off subject, but do we track or tax or have a fee for short-term rentals in as well?
That's
Yeah,
all handled by the county. Right,
What I'm wondering is could we assess a tax on short-term rentals in the city of Nisswa to help offset some of the cost of roads? Since those are the people who are putting all this extra traffic on in the summertime, there's extra 8,000 people that are around. A lot of them are here on vacation or using short-term rentals. I don't see why that would be unreasonable.
I think if you did that, you'd also want to have the hotels
It's fine.
as well. And I don't know how well that would fly.
yeah, it's gonna be a philosophy, examination of the philosophy of the city council, I guess, what are you comfortable implementing? The last city council was adamant that they weren't gonna have an assessment policy, and we had a hard time convincing them that they should have an assessment policy for extra structures, at one time we were considering bump outs and flower planters and this kind of thing for Main Street. And finally, I was able to get, the council to agree that, yeah, we shouldn't pay for that. That would be an assessment. And I think that's what we should have everywhere else, but the basic part of the road, you weren't gonna hear of it, doing an assessment. So I'm not sure how we move from having no assessment to an assessment policy. This is something we'll have to work on. And
well, I think the first step is seeing what other folks do.
right, I mean, I'll bring some
And that-
examples of ordinances that other communities have, but whatever it amounts to, let's say it was 25%, just to pick a number. Any amount, people are gonna balk at it. That's human nature. So, and like you said, the last group didn't have it, so this group is gonna be upset that they're getting an assessment if it comes.
You got to start somewhere.
Now, we haven't had any construction for what, 2 years? Road construction? I lose track. But anyway, it's kind of hard for people to understand.
Pre-COVID,
Well, yeah.
For over 3
It's
years.
hard for people to understand why we have all these roads going to pot. And nothing's happening. Well, there's good reason for it, but the average person doesn't know what that is.
right,
That's something that people should be made aware of. I mean, you hear people talking all the time about this stuff and they don't know what they're talking about.
so one thing to be aware of, and I addressed that in here. Following this meeting, I'm gonna work with Kiki to establish a page on our website that keeps track of the progress of this 2025 road project. And so the meetings that we have here, there'll be, links to that and the documents that we go over. Some of that would be the road assessment. Some of it would be, why do we do roads only every 7 years?
I think from what I'd like to do, in addition to that, that's a good idea, but I'd also like to maybe for the next meeting that we'll have, look into an assessment policy as an example. And because I think unless we have something like that, we really can't. I mean, this is a committee just to explore things. So why don't we explore that? Whether we adopt it or not, or recommend it or not, we can at least look at it and understand it ourselves.
It's something to react to.
Yeah,
It's something
I didn't even
to,
suggest
you
that.
know,
I think that's a good
discussion.
idea.
so
Start somewhere.
maybe next time if we could, would you be able to do that for next time?
Yeah, no, that was definitely gonna be. you
Yeah,
know,
let's at least look at it, whether, you know, it happens or not, we don't know, but. And then, the other thing too, I'm seeing here, so we have 31 miles of roads in the system in Nisswa.
Mhm.
Okay. And then, and so we do overlap 10-year bonds, road bonds, and only 2 bonds at a time. Every 5 years, we're doing this.
Right, so it's, I communicated it as 3, so. Right now, we're doing the work on one that we're not paying on, so there's one, there's 2 that are being paid back on at any given time is how it will
Mhm.
work.
Yeah,
And you're planning for the third, you're always planning for the third one, it's kind of how
Okay.
it works.
So what are we looking at for the next construction date?
2025,
2025. So that's another couple of years.
so that gives us.
Right around the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it gives us over a year to plan it, and that seems like a very long time, but if you start working on something like an
Yeah.
assessment policy and that gets. Ping pong between the committee and the council for a while, that year gets sucked up pretty fast. So I did also give you a list of the roads that are being considered, and so every year I do a road tour. And so I go through to see what roads need crack filling and where the patches need to be done, where trees need to be cleared and so on and so forth. But I also keep track of which ones are in the worst shape. And usually it lines up pretty well with when the oldest roads, the ones that, the ones that are furthest out and when they were repaved, and if you look at some of them on this list, you'll see that they were done in the late 80s or 90s, early 90s as far as being paved. So that's, a good long time ago.
Yeah.
So those are being considered. So I had made this preliminary list back in 2017 with a few more on here than what I had estimated would come up now. So what I'll be doing is working with Joe to get preliminary estimates on these roads. He'll probably come back with a proposal to do that engineering work. And so then we'll talk about that proposal and then we'll send him out to give us some cost estimates on this stuff.
Looks like a lot of stuff for 2025.
They're all 2025.
Yeah, I know.
I,
Be busy.
and I put these on here knowing full well that a few of them may not make the cut. We may have to say we want to do all of this, but we can't do them all. So this is why you're getting this list preliminary. Some of them we may even be able to take off. So this estimate from Anderson Brothers that I just handed out to you tonight. The alleyway behind the post office. And then possibly the alleyway behind like the dentist's office and that on the other side. We may resurface that yet this fall. We're not doing as much patchwork this year, and so we're gonna have some money that we could possibly just resurface those. Mostly because they're so far gone, we couldn't patch them enough to make them workable. So I got an estimate from Anderson Brothers to resurface them. Would have liked to have held off on that. There's talk of maybe a new motel behind the post office. I don't know. When that's gonna happen. I don't think the road will wait for that. So this is something I'm gonna be recommending to the council in August to have this work done. I'll hopefully try to get it done yet this fall if they can, so.
now
But
this,
that'll take some of the roads off of this list that I've given you. So if there's time, some that I can do that way, I will.
Nokomis or Linden might be good streets to start assessing on.
Well, so that was another thing that I did bring up in the assessment, when we look at it. Commercial roads or anything gets put on that shorter cycle I was talking about. Maybe that is where you start with your assessments. Cause
Really
why do
needs-
those roads have the wear and tear that they do? Cause there's a huge amount of commercial traffic and tourist traffic on there. So maybe that little bit of an assessment, that's where that should start. The other thing, you look at those roads you just brought up. They have not been willing to look at drainage,
Yeah.
and drainage is what kills the
Yeah.
roadway. And that's fine if we want to continue to go that way, if they prefer that type of roadway. Well, that's a more expensive roadway to maintain, so maybe that's a fair way to say it should be assessed.
It's a real eye opener when you drive in there. You know, we got the new roundabout, which looks great.
Mm-hmm.
We got all that new signage all over their property and they've spent a lot of money on signs, not just the entry signs, but signs everywhere telling you where to walk and all this stuff. And they've done really a good job. And then you got the street in the center and you can hardly call it a street. You know,
Well, there's been quite a bit of changes with the management.
yeah.
Grandview too, so. Early on, we were talking about resurfacing the streets through there with the roundabout project and it just kind of dropped off.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can bring that discussion back up for 2025. And then, so anyway, you've got the list of what roads we would like to do. Another document I gave you was just a graphic that shows how we arrived at this 40-year cycle and kind of how I sold it to the council at the time. And I'll use that as a starter model for a refined model for this go around. The other thing I gave you was this, and this is a copy of the road standard. This tells you, thicknesses and widths and of the roads that we're gonna be building.
We addressed that, a little over a year ago, we
Yeah.
adopted that,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah,
But that
So-
only applied to any new street going forward.
Right.
Yeah, it was adopted by the city council.
and it was approved by the city.
Yes.
council, Adopted by the city council, yeah.
So
Okay, so maybe for number two, the review of the 2018 road bond and completed projects. Any further discussion on that for now? If not, then and this is sort of part of it, I'd imagine, but number three, road tour results and the 2025 road bond eligible roads list. That's what you're just talking about.
that was the list we were just talking about. So
What's this road tour results?
That's what he was talking.
that's this.
That's that.
That's this list. So there's other lists that I gather from that, and I usually don't share them with the committee or the council. It's maintenance work. So
Mhm.
it's crack filling, it's patching, and so this road tour produces all of that. And so luckily this year, and surprisingly, the condition that the roads came out from this bad winter we just had, I thought we were gonna have way more patching than we needed to do, but given that we're gonna be doing a road bond in 2025, there's a lot of roads that we said, yeah, it could use some work, but we're gonna push it into that bond, make it last. And so my guys were able to do a lot of cold patching, the Band-Aid, keep it up.
Something like this alley job now, where does that money come from? What fund?
So I have two different funds that I draw from in the general. The one is a line item that I use for crack filling and patching, and then I have another line item for small road projects like that. And the two items together total to about 115,000 per year that we can use for maintenance.
I'd like to know currently with these bonds, how much of that results in the levy percentage? What is it at? Is it like 4% of the levy is handling these road bonds?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
I'd like to, I'm just curious about that, how much that is.
It's significant.
Mhm.
I would have to look at what our current road bond payment is, but
Yeah.
I'll bring that information back next month.
Okay. Okay, well then, anything further on the road tour results and eligible roads list? If not, let's go on to number 4 here. The recycling project's future. Now, just to overview it a little bit, we recommended that we go ahead and move the recycling center and to the water treatment area. And that was brought up to the council that month or the following month. And we had a very long discussion on this and a lot of very emotional responses about this, which we knew about as well. And what was decided at at the end of all of this and was that rather than go ahead and move it right away, let's wait a year and then we'll implement the recycling or the curbside recycling. And so that will be, that's going to be implemented as soon as we can. When was that?
So curbside recycling, we gave them a year, the haulers a year to come up with the equipment, so it'll be, excuse me, implemented in May.
Okay, yeah. And so that's, will take some time. And that's the reason why the April 1st date was checked for the following year, 2024, was picked to decide at that time, eliminate the recycling center or move it to the water waste center area. And I don't, my concern is that even though that was adopted and you have the information, this here about that it is in writing here that it's either to close the center or to move it. It's one of the two. It's not going to stay there. And that was decided. So I think not many people, unless you're really close, watching what the city council does, not many general users of it know that this is approaching. And my concern is that I'd like to make sure that people are more aware of this, somehow to get it out there, do another survey on this is my suggestion to get, and not just the people that it impacts close here, also people that actually use it. The summer, people who come here for the summer and anyone else who might actually use it. I don't know how we can actually get to that point, but maybe a survey monkey. I don't know how we'd reach all these people that come here, that actually reside here for the summertime.
I think one thing that comes to mind, Mr. Chair, is that, maybe put up some signage out there and just, this is gonna happen, a year from now, right?
Yeah.
So
So
we don't have a replacement site yet, but as of April or whatever that date is of 24, this is no longer gonna be the recycling center.
right.
Well, I think the council's got some homework to do possibly too. So the county has said that they will fund the site through 24. After that, they very vague, but it sounds like they have no interest in funding the site, either the construction or the operation,
Either side?
either site. Well, so right now, we pay half of $70,000 to operate this site that we have currently. That price is expected to go up in 24. Right now, we're looking at an estimated 75,000, so our half of that would be 37.5. And after that, if we continue to operate the existing site, which I don't think we should do or can do, all of that 75,000 then becomes the city's liability. If we decide to construct a site, we're into it for, I think the last estimate was $500,000. Now we've pared that down a little bit with, I think, the council had no interest in pursuing the shooting range for the police, and there's a few other little things, but it's still gonna be, it's not gonna be $100,000. price, if it was a 500,000 before, it might still be 300,000 because the fence still has to be there, the concrete and all of that. Where does that money come from? Build it. Right now, the city's looking at several different projects. And other things such as the hockey rink that has to get rebuilt and all these roads that have to get rebuilt. Where does this recycling center fit in that? You know, how do we get money to pay for that? And so that's a discussion that we're gonna have moving forward. So I think the idea that this recycling site could just go away altogether is a real possibility. I think there's at least 2 council members who have expressed as much already, and I think a couple members of this committee have also said that they think that's the way it could go or should go, so.
That won't affect the on-site pickup, like
No.
curbside pickup.
No,
Okay, so they're separate.
no, and anybody who's a resident in Nisswa would still have access to garbage and recycling services. They would just unfortunately have to pay directly for it.
Right.
Personally, I think it's been a nice feature, but it's pretty hard to justify when you see the figures. You know, who's actually using it,
Mhm.
and it's locals that are paying for it, you know, and it's really kind of out of balance.
We've talked about charging for it too. The only way, a good way to do that is you gotta be set up like the county is. You gotta have a gate and somebody standing at the gate
Yeah,
to make sure that they pay. And
Yeah, it's expensive.
Well, you can actually have a gate that would open automatically, but you'd have to have a card to get in type thing, right?
we've talked about that too, but.
Yeah. And the idea is that if we do move it to the wastewater center area, that we would have to charge for that service. And by doing that, of course, the county won't pay
Exactly.
at all. But the idea is that it would pay for itself if we actually do that. The cost will be setting it up in the first place, which could be that 500,000 or whatever. And I guess that's the real question that I think we should let people know. Whether it be setting that up and have a survey monkey, go to so-and-so, give your opinion. And the way to say it would be that as of April 1st of 2024, this site will close. And then the alternative is to move it to this other site, and it costs a certain amount of money. And after that, it will be a charge for it. Which would you prefer? Close completely, shut everything down, or move over there? I think
that's
that's,
pretty complicated though.
it is, I know.
I think his idea of putting a sign there to start with is a good one.
Well, the sign's good, but then how do we respond to that sign? And that would be with the Survey Monkey,
Yeah, maybe after that.
right? And then to have in the Survey Monkey that choice.
Yeah.
Which do you want? You know, what is it that you'd be willing to do?
Would you just have that on the city's website then? Just direct people to go to the city's website and vote on a survey there? Or?
There again, you're gonna get a vote that's just like you got the last time.
Right.
Yeah. I was wondering that too. Part of me thought maybe you just send a postcard out to every property owner in Nisswa and let them vote. But most of them probably have their own garbage service and they're probably not too interested in maintaining this site. There'll be a few who are,
Mhm.
but maybe this is a good question to start with at this committee. How much should we care about what people around the community
Feel
do with
about
their
it.
garbage?
Yeah,
The county just completed a $1 million plus site for recycling out at their landfill. And that's where the county would like to direct all the material. They would rather this site close.
unfortunately, what'll probably happen like back 30 years ago or whenever it was, garbage started to show up all over the woods around here. And if you flew the area, when the leaves were out, it was everywhere. I mean, garbage was everywhere, and that's probably what'll happen.
But
And
they'll also have-
you got little control over, what Crow Wing County is gonna do. I think the message that needs to get out there is that the city of Nisswa cares, this is what we're doing, this is where we're at, we need your input.
Mhm.
The city council has decided that this is no longer gonna be here. Please visit this website and tell us,
that-
what you think. We need some input. And that, you know, you're opening it up to the public, and I know more than one person has gotten up here and you know, testified before our committee and then the city council. We never know what's going on, right? Well, you know, you got to make an effort to, you know, postcards, signage, word of mouth. That's the way stuff gets out.
That's exactly my concern. I don't want it to be suddenly sneak up on everybody and find out
Exactly.
what happened? Why didn't I know? I want this to be widely known.
So you do what is reasonable to get the word out, then, you know,
Yeah.
then you go about your business.
So,
I think to some degree, Dill, you're concerned about stuff being left out because there's not a drop off site. I share that, but at the same point, we're also gonna have the availability for people to have curbside pickup, which hasn't been there before. So
That's true.
a lot of that will be even more convenient because people will just be able to put it on their curb instead of having to drive it in here and then having it blow out around.
We had nothing back there.
Right.
30 years, nothing.
Yeah, so
That's true.
I'll be interested to see how things go after that's fully implemented. How the people in Nisswa feel. How did things go over July 4th this year? Did you see a huge increase like we have in past years?
So I was told that our tonnage has probably gone up this summer quite a bit. Well, if you recall, we were told the curbside recycling would probably drop off our volume by 25%. Well, we've been going up by 7% or more a year, each year. So if that trend is continued this year, that 25% now becomes 18%. And within 2 years, it's 11%. I mean, so in reality, we'll be right back to where we are today within a short period of time.
Mhm.
So I think if we're going to continue with a site, it has to be a new one. And that doesn't give us a huge amount of time to construct a new one.
How did things go over the 4th this year as far as the operation of this?
I haven't heard any complaints, but I know it was busy.
Was anybody around on the committee here?
I know I was out of town.
I use it all the time and it was just packed to the gills.
Was it?
Yeah, it was overflowing, but it got taken care of.
Out of cardboard.
Yeah, cardboard, yeah, too. But I guess just from my perspective, whether we keep the recycling center or not. Either way, to me, is fine based upon, you know, just as long as people know what's happening, have an input to tell us what to do, you know, or give their opinion of what they would like to see. And then knowing the information. I just don't want it to sneak up and all of a sudden everybody says, you never said anything about this. So I think the idea of having a signage at that site.
Yeah.
Along with a way to communicate, you know, from that signage, you know, go to so-and-so.com to give your opinion. And maybe even the postcard to get it out to the general public as well. Can you look at that? Just give us a recommendation, what might be most effective.
No, you can even put something in like the Echo.
Yeah.
You know, I think they'll do that as a public service, you know, more than once.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
To do your due diligence and get the word out there so people can't come back and say, you know what?
Yeah.
Why do you guys do this stuff without telling us?
Because it is going to happen faster than we think, you know, it's April of next year.
So we're looking at two questions then. Continue it at the new site or eliminate it altogether.
Continuing it at the other site,
Yeah, the new site.
yeah, the new site, or yeah, eliminate altogether. That's all it is.
That's the two choices. There's
The
no
two
third.
choices, it is not staying there, period.
As of right now.
Things can always change, but that's the way it was adopted at the city council. It
yeah,
shall
as of right
be
now.
either eliminated or else moved.
Right.
I think one thing that's important to understand to just, you know, in case there's people watching. No matter where we build a site. Cost of fencing is what the cost of fencing is. The
Mhm.
size of the pads are gonna be the same. it's where we locate it won't affect the cost of it a lot. One thing that does affect the cost of it is we own the property that we're planning on putting it in. Anything else, unless it's donated property, will cost as much as the site itself, or as much as the facility itself.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense to put it somewhere else. You know,
And-
you've got your buildings there, you know, the garages, the whole thing.
I know it's inconvenient for some, but one of the council members had pointed out, it's a free service. And you don't have to drive all the way out to the airport to access it. But you do have to drive a little ways. So is it worth keeping it in town? That's where it's gonna be.
But there is no, I mean, we discussed about that, you know, trying to purchase something, another spot, which was turned down as well.
Yeah.
Like you say, it costs as much, if not more, than to actually build the facility at the wastewater treatment area.
Yes.
So that's why it was said either shut it down or move it there.
Right.
It's just those two things. And I'd like to get that word out, that that's what's happening here.
So is that in black and white?
Yep.
Right
Right here. Yep.
So then public ought to know that.
Yep. They need to know it.
We'll probably start part of that before the next meeting, but I will come back with a proposal for how to deal with it.
Okay, good. And that echo sounds really good too. That'll help.
Mhm.
I think, yeah. Okay, any other discussion on this? Okay, then we'll head off to number 5 here. Are there any member concerns or questions or anything about reports? If not, Tom, you don't have anything, right?
Pardon me?
You have anything, any concerns or anything?
I've missed the last couple meetings. All these other issues that have been going on around the community, like the Schaefer's addition, Hazelwood extension and all that, is that just kind of on hold for the time being?
Schaefer's has been mothballed as far as I know.
Okay.
We are working on. So MinDOT's doing a study for their projects for 2030. With 371,
Yeah.
and so our backage roads that we were talking about are gonna be. Looked at as part of that, you know, what MinDOT's, if any, what their participation will be. In those two projects. As far as Hazelwood extension, that is what the backage roads are, what the Hazelwood extension has become.
Mhm.
So,
Has there been any movement on that at all, or?
not really any movement. The MinDOT is in its planning stages, and so they've hired a firm to look at the whole corridor from basically the railroad tracks up through where you come in at the roundabout here. And so they'll be looking at all the little side roads and frontage roads along the way. Our ideas for the backage roads. And
Part of
they'll, you know, they'll be looking at accesses, whether they should close or stay open.
That sounds like it's gonna take years.
Yeah, 2030 is what they're targeting.
What's the story on this alleged hotel in downtown Nisswa?
And right now it's just being planned. It's not, they haven't come forward with anything to be approved yet, as far as I know.
So could be real, huh?
It could be real, and that was the dilemma I was pointing out. We're resurfacing that road behind the post office. Depending on how that is built, it could change the footprint of that alleyway, but it won't wait, you know, that long for a major repair. So we're gonna resurface it if we can, if the council will agree and.
Seems
move
to me
forward.
like an awful large project for that small area.
Yeah, if we had something a little more concrete as far as when it was gonna happen,
Yeah.
might hold off, but I don't, even if it was gonna be approved, I don't see it happening as early as next spring, and we really gotta have something done with that alleyway sooner.
You're gonna have a real traffic problem, all kinds of stuff like that.
I know they're working with MinDOT on some things, but I have no idea where that's at. It's not a conversation I'm included in, I guess.
With that MinDOT plan that they're going with. Out in front of that mall where Subway's at,
Mhm.
there's that. That crossover
Yep.
on 371. Are they talking about changing that at all? Kind
Yes.
of like they're doing down at Baxter? And
That is one mechanism that they are proposing along the entire route is more J turns.
Yeah.
because there were
Yeah.
a couple of really bad accidents.
That would be tied in with our backage road. In other words,
Yeah.
if we put in the backage road, they would close that. That's the whole idea.
Real knuckleheads out there.
Hmm?
That intersect, that crossing by the subway, it's very dangerous.
Yeah, there were a couple of really bad accidents there this summer already.
Yeah. They're getting pretty well aware of that one, and I think they're gonna do something with it. It's outside of the area, but I know that there's been some discussions about the 29 intersection up north here too, so.
It's never been built.
At least they're looking at it, so there's a chance that some of this stuff will get fixed. I'm not a really big fan of the J turns, but it's better than nothing. I
This is out
guess.
of Nisswa, but is this business on the 210, 371, makeover? Is that just rumor or is that part of the?
Overpay.
Yeah, is that just rumor or is that? That'll be interesting to see how they,
Which one's going under and
I've
which
been
one's
to
going
Elk River,
over?
but I think they're doing it there too.
Another
371.
one I was saying they should have done 30 years ago.
It's
Now with
371.
that railroad
Now it's
track.
harder.
Huh?
Well, they might want to move our building.
There you go, there you go. They probably will need that.
No, they don't.
huh?
Could be a long ways off the
Well, I
road.
understand.
That railroad track is gonna really complicate that.
Okay, I think let's go ahead and move on. So are you okay then, Tom?
Yes, sir.
What about you, Dale? Anything else? Anything, Galen?
I'm good.
Well, then, if there's no other concerns or anything, I'd like to get a motion that we adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Sure.
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Hi,
Opposed? Carried. We're closed. Thank you.
what's the timeline on that? Have they even
I
assigned
just
their?
started mumbling.